I watched as my wife, Amanda, gave me a choice I never saw coming. Standing there, in front of everyone, she looked me in the eyes and said, "Stay and listen, or walk away." Then, without another word, she turned her back on me, grabbed her keys, and walked out with him. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was he? How long had this been going on? What the hell had just happened? The moment I thought I had everything figured out, she shattered it all. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The air was thick with tension as I stood there, unable to move. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what had just happened. I watched Amanda walk away without even sparing a second glance. She didn't hesitate for a moment, as if she had already made up her mind. My heart was pounding in my chest, the words she had just spoken echoing in my ears. Stay and listen, or walk away. The coldness in her voice, the lack of remorse, made it clear this wasn't just some argument we were having. This was something deeper, something that had been building up for far longer than I realized. I thought back to all the little things I had missed, the late nights, the phone calls she would quickly end when I walked into the room, the sudden change in her mood whenever I asked her where she had been. I had tried to brush it all off, convincing myself that it was nothing. After all, we had been together for 5 years. Our marriage was solid, or so I thought. But now, standing there, watching her walk away with him, I felt like the world had been ripped out from under me. Him. Who was he? Was this something she had been planning for weeks? Months? I couldn't stand there any longer. I had to know. I had to confront her, find out what had been going on. I stormed out of the house and caught up with her just as she reached the driveway. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I had to say something. "Amanda!" I shouted, my voice breaking the silence of the night. She paused but didn't turn around. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Who is he? What the hell is going on?" She turned slowly, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't sorrow. It was indifference. Like she had already prepared herself for this moment, for me to finally catch on. "I told you," she said coldly, her voice barely audible over the sound of the engine running. "This is the end. There's nothing left to say." I felt my blood boil. The end? What the hell was she talking about? Was she really standing there, acting like she didn't care? "Don't do this, Amanda," I pleaded, my voice thick with emotion. "We can fix this. We can work through whatever this is." I wanted to reach for her, to hold her and make her see reason, but she took a step back. "No," she said firmly, her eyes locked on mine. "I don't want to fix this. I've been trying to tell you for months, but you wouldn't listen. I'm done." She turned her back on me, walking towards the man who was waiting in the car, his eyes never leaving her. I stood there, feeling as though my entire life was unraveling before me. She climbed into the car without a second thought, and just like that, they drove off, leaving me standing alone in the street, in complete shock. I couldn't move. My legs felt like jelly, and my mind was spinning. I had never felt so humiliated, so betrayed. The woman I loved, the woman I thought would always be by my side, had just walked away without any hesitation. But then, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just stand there and let her get away with this. I needed answers. I needed to know everything. I had to confront her, even if it meant facing the harsh truth of what had been happening behind my back. I followed the car. My mind raced, questions swirling around me. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Why didn't I see it? I didn't know where they were going, but I wasn't about to let them get away without a fight. I had to know the truth. I had to confront her, to make her understand the pain she had caused. I wasn't going to let her walk away like this, pretending like nothing had happened. I tailed them for what felt like hours, my anger growing with each passing minute. They didn't notice me at first, and I kept my distance, trying to keep my emotions in check. But as the car turned into a dark alleyway, I felt my pulse quicken. I knew something was about to happen, something that would change everything. I parked a few blocks away and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see the car parked outside a rundown building, the kind of place I never would have expected Amanda to be. What the hell was she doing here? I couldn't just sit back and let her be with him, not after everything. Not after what she had just done to me. I knew I had to act fast. I made my way to the building, keeping low and trying to avoid being seen. As I approached, I heard voices, Amanda's voice, but it wasn't alone. It was him, the man she had chosen over me. I crept closer, just enough to hear their conversation. "Are you sure you want to keep doing this?" I heard the man say. Amanda's laugh sent a chill down my spine. "What's the problem? It's over with him. He'll get over it." I felt the anger surge inside me. So this was what it was about. She had been lying to me the whole time. She had been planning this for God knows how long. I needed answers, but I also knew I had to be careful. I couldn't just burst in and confront her without thinking. But my emotions were running wild, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I had to face her. I stood there, hidden in the shadows, my heart pounding as I listened to Amanda's laugh echoing in the empty alley. The sound twisted in my gut like a knife. How could she do this to me? How could she be so cold, so indifferent to everything we had shared? I needed answers. I had to hear it from her own lips. I had to know what this man meant to her, how long this betrayal had been going on. I couldn't stand there in silence anymore. She had made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. I stepped out from behind the corner, my hands clenched into fists. The adrenaline coursing through me made everything feel sharp, like my senses were heightened. I could feel my anger rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let her see how much she had affected me. I had to confront her, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. As I approached the building, I saw them through the cracked window, Amanda, sitting next to him. He had his arm around her, a possessive look in his eyes. I hated him immediately, even though I didn't know who he was. But it wasn't just him I hated. It was her. The woman I loved. The woman I had trusted. My hands trembled as I knocked on the door, the sound echoing through the empty space. I didn't care if they were startled, didn't care if they saw me. I was past caring about their feelings. I needed to confront her. I needed her to explain herself. A moment passed, and then the door swung open. Amanda stood there, her eyes widening in shock when she saw me. Her face, it was so cold. There was no warmth, no recognition of the love we once shared. Just an indifferent, almost bored look. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice laced with annoyance. As if she had every right to be annoyed at me for showing up. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady, though every word felt like it was being dragged from my chest. She glanced at the man sitting inside, who was now standing up, his posture relaxed, as if he wasn't at all concerned about my presence. He looked at me with an expression of amusement, his smirk irritating me further. "This isn't your business anymore," Amanda said, stepping in front of me, blocking the door. I wanted to shove her aside, to push through and demand that she listen to me, but I held myself back. I wasn't here to fight, at least, not physically. "Is it?" I asked, my voice low, controlled. "It doesn't feel like it's over yet. I still have questions." "Why am?" Her eyes flashed with something, defensiveness? Maybe. But there was no remorse. No apology. Just the cold indifference I had grown used to over the past few months. "It's over because I said it is," she replied, crossing her arms over her chest. "You haven't been the man I needed. You've been distant, always working, always distracted. You stopped caring." "Stopped caring," I repeated, trying to keep my composure, though I felt the words hit me like a slap. "You're telling me that you've been seeing this guy because I was busy working?" My voice cracked, but I quickly regained control. She didn't even flinch at my tone. Instead, she looked past me, as though I were just another problem to dismiss. The man, still standing behind her, stepped forward with a cocky smile. "Maybe she just realized she deserves better," he said, his tone mocking. I wanted to explode. I wanted to tell him exactly how I felt, but my focus was on Amanda. This was about her. This was about the woman who had been my world, my everything for years. "Better?" I asked, narrowing my eyes at her. "You're telling me that this is better? That he is better than me? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done for you?" Amanda didn't even look at me when she answered. "I didn't ask for your opinion. I'm done." Her words were so final, so cold, that it felt like a punch to the gut. I stood there, unable to speak for a moment, the realization of what she was saying sinking in. "You don't get to just walk away like this," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You owe me an explanation. You can't just tear apart everything we had and expect me to walk away quietly. I loved you, Amanda. I still do. And this," I gestured between the two of them, the man and her, "this is not love." She shook her head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You never really understood, did you? I didn't love you like you thought I did. It was never enough." Her words were sharp, cutting through me like a knife. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers, but something in me held back. Why was I still here? Why was I still fighting for a woman who had already given up on me? Her gaze softened for a split second, but it wasn't out of regret. It was almost like she was pitying me. "You'll understand eventually. I'm not the woman you thought I was." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't the time for me to break down. I couldn't let her see that. But inside, everything was unraveling. I had trusted her. I had given her everything. But now she was gone. The cold reality of the moment was settling in. As Amanda and her new companion stood there, eyes locked on me with a mixture of pity and dismissal, I felt every ounce of strength in my body drain away. The anger was still there, of course, like a burning fire, keeping me alive in the face of this betrayal. But the pain? The heartbreak? That was something else. I wanted to scream, to shout at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much her betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. But in that moment, standing in front of her with her new man by her side, I realized that my words would mean nothing. She was already gone. Amanda took a step closer to me, her voice softening, though her eyes remained distant. "Look," she said, her tone almost too calm for someone who had just ripped apart my world. "I never wanted to hurt you. But we both know this wasn't working. You were always too busy, always focused on work. I needed more. And I found it. Is that all this is?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You just needed more? And you thought he could give it to you?" Her companion, still standing behind her with that smug grin on his face, finally spoke up. "Yeah, man. Sometimes, it's not about the big stuff. It's about being there when it counts." His words cut like daggers. I turned my attention back to Amanda, trying to see the woman I married in her face, but all I saw was a stranger. She wasn't the person I thought she was. She wasn't the woman who had promised to love me, for better or worse. She wasn't the one who had held my hand through the hard times, the one who had shared my dreams. The realization hit me hard. She was never truly mine, not in the way I had believed. And I had been a fool to think otherwise. "I don't want to hear it anymore," I said, my voice firm despite the emotion swirling inside me. "You've made your choice, and I've made mine." Amanda looked at me with that same cold expression, like I was just another inconvenience in her life. "Goodbye," then she said, turning to walk away without even a hint of regret. As she walked away, leaving me standing there with her new man, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. I had lost not just a wife, but a part of myself. I had given her everything, and in return, she had walked away without a second thought. I turned and walked back to my car, the weight of it all hitting me as soon as I stepped inside. The tears I had been holding back for so long began to fall, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to break. But even as the tears came, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her define me anymore. As I drove away from that place, from the woman I had loved for so long, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to dwell on the past. I wasn't going to let this betrayal destroy me. I was going to move on, rebuild, and become a better version of myself. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her take my soul with her. The drive home felt like a blur. I didn't know where I was going, or what I was doing. The only thing I could feel was the weight of everything that had just happened. Amanda's words echoed in my mind, her coldness cutting deeper with every thought. "I didn't love you like you thought I did." That line replayed in my mind over and over again. How could she say that? How could she throw everything away, everything we built, with such ease? It felt like a part of me had been ripped out, and in its place was nothing but emptiness. I parked in the driveway, the house that used to be our home now feeling like a cage. I had no idea what to do next. I couldn't go inside, not now, not after everything that had just happened. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the house, trying to find a reason to move, to get out of the car. But I couldn't. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Eventually, I got out and walked inside, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The memories of our time together were everywhere, photos on the walls, little reminders of the life we had shared. But all of it felt meaningless now. Every corner of this house seemed to whisper her name, and I hated it. I hated her. I hated him. I walked into the living room and collapsed onto the couch, my mind still reeling from the confrontation. The anger that had kept me sharp earlier had now settled into a heavy sadness. How could I have been so blind? I thought I knew her. I thought we were partners in everything. But it had all been a lie. I reached for my phone, needing to reach out to someone. But who could I call? Who could understand what I was going through? My friends would probably tell me to move on, to forget about her. But how could I? She was a part of me, and now she was gone. The loneliness was suffocating. I didn't want to feel sorry for myself, but I couldn't help it. I missed the version of her that had once been mine, the woman who held my hand during difficult times, who laughed with me, who loved me. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay stuck in this place of pain and resentment forever. I needed to move on. I needed to find a way to heal, even if it meant letting go of everything I had ever known. But the question lingered in the back of my mind, how? How do you heal from something like this? How do you pick up the pieces of your life when the person you trusted most in the world has shattered everything? I had no answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to let go of her, of the life we had built together. I needed to find my own path, to become someone stronger, someone who wasn't defined by her betrayal. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I didn't want to go out, didn't want to see anyone. I locked myself away, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. But every time I closed my eyes, her face would appear. The way she had looked at me when she walked away with him, it haunted me. I spent hours scrolling through our old photos, remembering the good times, the way things used to be. But I knew deep down that those memories didn't define me anymore. I was no longer the man I was when we first met. That man was gone, along with the woman I had loved. But I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't keep reliving the past. It wasn't easy, and I had a long road ahead of me, but I knew that the only way to truly heal was to stop looking back. It was time to build a new life. A life without Amanda. The days felt longer than they had in months. Every morning, I woke up to the same reality. The silence was deafening, the weight of her absence unbearable. But as the days went by, something inside me started to shift. The anger that had fueled me in the beginning was starting to fade, replaced by a strange sense of numbness. The reality of my life without Amanda was sinking in, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I spent most of my time out of the house, avoiding the places that reminded me of her. Every corner of that house felt like a reminder of her betrayal. I needed to leave it behind, but every time I stepped out into the world, the weight of it all followed me. The memories of us, of what we had been, haunted me. I had started picking up new hobbies to fill the void. I went to the gym more often, pushing myself harder than I ever had before. If I couldn't control what had happened in my life, at least I could control my body. It was a small victory, but it was something. And then, one day, I decided to take a trip. I didn't know where I was going or what I was hoping to find. I just knew that I needed to leave everything behind, even if just for a while. I packed my bags, grabbed my keys, and drove. I didn't even care where I was headed. I just needed to get away from the house, away from everything that reminded me of her. As I drove, I thought about how much I had changed. Before all this happened, I would have never been able to just get in the car and leave without a plan. But now, it felt like I was a different person. A stronger person, maybe. Or maybe just someone who had lost so much that they didn't care anymore. Either way, I was going to figure this out. I was going to move forward, no matter how hard it was. I ended up in a small town by the coast, a place I had never been before. It was quiet, peaceful. I checked into a small motel and walked around the town, letting the sea breeze wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm. The world didn't feel like it was falling apart. There was a sense of freedom here, a feeling that I hadn't known in what felt like ages. I spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about Amanda, about the betrayal, about how much I had given her and how little she had given in return. I thought about how much I had invested in our relationship, how much I had truly believed in her. And then I thought about myself, about the person I had become. Was this the man I wanted to be? Someone who was defined by someone else's actions? Someone who let someone else's betrayal dictate his life? No, I decided. That wasn't me. I couldn't let Amanda's choices define who I was. I couldn't let her hurt me anymore. I was done living in the past. It was time to rebuild. It was time to find out who I really was without her. I returned home, but this time, it was different. The house didn't feel as suffocating anymore. I still felt the ghosts of our memories, but they no longer had control over me. I started making small changes. I got rid of the things that reminded me of her, the pictures, the trinkets. It felt like clearing out the old, making room for the new. But as I cleaned, I found something unexpected. A letter. It was from Amanda. I hadn't seen it before, and it was addressed to me. My heart dropped when I saw it. Had she written this before she left? I sat down on the couch, the letter trembling in my hands. I wasn't sure I was ready to read it, but something in me knew I needed to. So, I opened it. The letter was short, but the words hit me harder than I expected. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for it to end like this. But I need to find myself, and I can't do that with you. I hope you can understand. It wasn't much. It wasn't an apology I wanted to hear, but it was an apology nonetheless. It made me realize that she wasn't coming back. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was me. I was going to be okay. It had been weeks since I found Amanda's letter, and though it had given me a strange sense of closure, the feelings still lingered. They weren't as intense as they had been immediately after the betrayal, but they were there, bubbling beneath the surface, ready to burst out at any moment. I started spending more time focusing on myself. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. I joined a support group, talked to people who had been through similar situations, and started to realize that I wasn't alone. There was a whole world outside of my broken marriage, a world full of people who had picked up the pieces and moved on. And for the first time in months, I felt like I might actually be able to do that too. But it wasn't all easy. There were nights when the loneliness would creep back in, reminding me of what I had lost. There were moments when I would drive past places Amanda and I used to visit, and the memories would come rushing back, overwhelming me. It wasn't just the happy memories, it was the moments when I had felt neglected, when I had known something was off but didn't have the courage to confront it. I started going out with friends more often, trying to engage in activities that didn't remind me of her. I joined a few new social groups, signed up for a cooking class, and took up hiking on the weekends. It was in those moments, with the fresh air filling my lungs and the sun shining down, that I realized something important. I was finally living for myself. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset, I began to reflect on everything I had been through. I had been devastated, no doubt. The betrayal, the lies, the rejection, it all hit me harder than I ever expected. But somewhere along the way, I had started to rebuild. I had started to let go. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was actually moving forward. But I knew there was one more step I had to take. I needed to forgive. I wasn't forgiving Amanda for her sake, and I wasn't forgiving her because I wanted her back. No, I was forgiving her because I needed to. I needed to let go of the resentment, the anger, and the bitterness that had been holding me hostage for so long. I couldn't keep carrying that weight around. It was toxic. It was eating away at me. I sat there, in the quiet of my apartment, breathing deeply, trying to clear my mind. I had to forgive her. Not for her, but for me. For my peace of mind. For my future. The next day, I went for a walk in the park, the crisp autumn air brushing against my face. As I walked, I thought about all the things I had been through, all the pain I had endured. But I also thought about what I had gained. I had grown stronger. I had learned more about myself in the past few months than I had in the years I had spent with Amanda. As I passed a bench, I saw a couple sitting there, laughing and enjoying each other's company. They looked so happy, and for a moment, I felt a pang of envy. I wondered if I would ever find that again. Would I ever love again? The thought was terrifying. But it was also a realization. I wasn't ready yet. And that was okay. I didn't need to rush into another relationship. What I needed was to heal completely, to be whole on my own before I could give someone else the love they deserved. It was then that I realized something that had been staring me in the face all along. I had been looking for love in all the wrong places. I had been searching for validation in Amanda, in our relationship, instead of within myself. I had lost sight of who I was, of what I needed. But now, I was finding it again. I walked back to my apartment that afternoon with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the weight of the past was starting to lift. I didn't know what the future held, but I was finally ready to face it head on. Time moved differently now. The days no longer dragged on like they had in the weeks immediately after Amanda left. I was learning to live with the silence, the stillness that had once been unbearable. It was strange, but with each passing day, I found myself becoming more comfortable with who I was becoming, a person who no longer defined himself by his past, by Amanda, or by the painful memories we had shared. I had spent months wrestling with the anger, the resentment, and the sadness that had consumed me. But now, I felt a strange sense of clarity. It was as if a fog had lifted, and I could finally see things for what they were. The betrayal, though painful, had given me a new perspective. It had shown me who I could become when I stopped being afraid to face the truth. But even with this newfound clarity, I couldn't escape the occasional doubts that crept in. It happened one night, a few weeks after my trip to the coast, when I found myself alone in my apartment, flipping through old photo albums. The photos showed me and Amanda in happier times, vacations, birthdays, quiet nights in. There we were, smiling, laughing, as if everything was perfect. The person in those photos seemed so far removed from who I was now. Who was I now? I had spent so much of my life trying to please Amanda, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through my fingers. I thought I was doing the right thing, building a life with someone I trusted. But in the end, I had to face the fact that she didn't want that life anymore. She didn't want me, and that was hard to accept. Even now, after everything that had happened, I still longed for the person I thought she was. The woman who had once promised me forever. The woman I thought I knew. But this was my reality now. I couldn't change it. I couldn't go back to who I was. And as much as I wished I could, I knew I had to face the future without her. The phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. Hey, it's Jake. I know this might sound crazy, but I wanted to check in. I heard about what happened with you and Amanda. I'm really sorry. I know it's been a while, but if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Jake. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't heard from him in years. Jake was an old friend, someone I had lost touch with over the years, especially after Amanda and I had become more focused on our relationship. He had been there for me when I first moved to the city, but over time, I had drifted away from him. I hadn't realized how much I had distanced myself from everyone until I got the text from him. I stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to keep pretending that I didn't need anyone. But the other part of me, the part that was starting to heal and knew that I couldn't do this alone anymore. I needed help. I needed connection. I typed a quick reply, my fingers trembling slightly. Thanks, Jake. I really appreciate it. It's been tough, but I think I'm starting to figure things out. Within moments, he replied. I know it's been a while, but I'm here if you need anything. Let's grab a drink sometime, okay? It'll be good to catch up. I smiled, feeling a small glimmer of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe there were people out there who cared about me, who hadn't given up on me, even when I had given up on myself. I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair, letting the thought of reaching out to Jake settle in. Maybe this was the next step for me. Maybe this was the moment I needed to start reconnecting with the world outside of the pain and the betrayal I had been trapped in. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was starting to take control of my life again. I wasn't defined by Amanda's choices. I wasn't defined by the past. I was creating something new. I was rebuilding myself, piece by piece. The healing wasn't easy. It wasn't immediate. But it was happening. Slowly, but surely. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like there might be a future waiting for me after all. As the weeks passed, I started to feel the old wounds begin to heal, albeit slowly. It wasn't that I had completely forgiven Amanda, or that the pain of her betrayal had evaporated overnight. But the scars were no longer as fresh, and I was starting to see things in a new light. I had made real progress. Every time I thought about her, I didn't feel that surge of anger or that all-consuming sadness. It was more like a dull ache, a reminder of something that had been, but was no longer. And that was okay. I had come to terms with the fact that our chapter was over. It had been a painful chapter, yes, but it had taught me something valuable. And then there was Jake. Reaching out to him had been one of the best decisions I had made in the last few months. Our first night out wasn't anything monumental, but it felt like a small victory. It wasn't about the drinks or the conversation. It was about the fact that I was out there again, reconnecting with someone who cared. I realized that even though I had lost Amanda, there were still people in my life who valued me. I wasn't as alone as I had convinced myself I was. Jake and I caught up over the next few weeks, meeting up whenever we could, talking about everything and nothing. It was refreshing, being around someone who wasn't tied to my past with Amanda, someone who didn't have any preconceived notions of who I was or what I had been through. He didn't pity me. He didn't judge me. He just listened. But even with all this progress, I was still cautious. A part of me was terrified of getting too close to anyone again. I couldn't shake the fear that I might find myself in the same situation again, that I might open up to someone and have them walk away. I had been burned, and that kind of pain wasn't something you easily forget. Still, I knew that if I was going to truly move forward, I couldn't let the fear of what had happened with Amanda control me. I had to take risks. I had to trust again, even if it meant opening myself up to the possibility of being hurt. Life couldn't be lived in the shadows of past pain. It was time for me to step into the light. I decided to make another change, one that was long overdue. I picked up the phone one evening and called the therapist I had been meaning to reach out to for months. I had been avoiding it, telling myself that I didn't need it, that I could handle everything on my own. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. I needed help. After a brief conversation, we scheduled an appointment for the following week. I didn't know exactly what to expect from therapy, but I knew it was time. I had spent far too long trying to bottle everything up, trying to solve everything on my own. It was time to open up, to let someone else help me make sense of the mess that was my heart. When the day of my appointment arrived, I was nervous, to say the least. Walking into the therapist's office, I felt like I was stepping into uncharted territory. I had no idea what to say or how to start. But as soon as I sat down and began talking, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't have to carry the burden of this alone. Over the next few months, I continued to see the therapist, unpacking everything I had been holding inside. The anger, the sadness, the hurt, they were all there, waiting to be dealt with. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone in it. I had a safe space to express everything, to finally let go of the things that had been eating away at me for so long. In those sessions, I began to understand that my healing wasn't linear. There were ups and downs, moments when I felt like I was making huge strides, and other times when it felt like I had taken a step backward. But each time, I kept moving forward, no matter how small the steps were. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But it was worth it. And somewhere along the way, I realized something else. I wasn't defined by what Amanda did to me. I wasn't defined by my pain. I was defined by how I chose to rise above it. I hadn't let the betrayal break me. I hadn't let it steal my future. Instead, I had turned it into something that fueled my growth, my strength, and my resilience. In the end, I didn't need Amanda to complete me. I didn't need her to validate me. I had learned to validate myself. I had learned that I was worthy of love, of happiness, and of a future that was entirely my own. And for the first time in a long time, I looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came next, no longer bound by the past.